Good evening and welcome to the Calaveras Council of Governments June 6, 2018 meeting. If you would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our first item this evening is the consent agenda. Consent agenda items are expected to be routine and non-controversial and will be acted upon by the council at one time without discussion. Any council member, staff member, or interested party may request that an item be removed from the consent agenda for further discussion. Council, do we have anything wishing to be pulled? Staff? Interested parties? Seeing none, do we have a motion to move for the consent agenda?
So move, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Tofinelli, seconded by Councilmember Conwell. All those in favor?
Aye.
Approved 6-0. 6-0 absent. Our next item is public comment. Public comment is limited to 5 minutes per person. Comments shall be limited to items that are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the council and not on the posted agenda. Do we have any public comment this evening? Seeing none, item number 6. The acceptance and presentation of the triennial performance audits of the Calaveras Council of Governments and Calaveras Transit System for fiscal years 2014-15 through 2016-17. Mrs. Collins.
Good evening, Council. The COG is required by the Transportation Development Act to develop triennial performance audits, which are every 3 years, of the COG and the transit operators by a third party. The last triennial audits were completed in 2015, and so this next round is due now in 2018. The COG hired Derek Wong with Michael Baker to complete the audits, and we have attached the copies of the final reports for you to this agenda. And I'll introduce Derek Wong here. That will provide a brief presentation, overview of the audits and findings and recommendations. Derek?
Yeah, great, thank you, Amber, very much. And just want to make sure everyone did receive a copy of the presentation then? You have, okay. Thank you, and good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Derek Wong with Michael Baker International, and thank you for having me today on this beautiful evening. We were retained by Calaveras COG to conduct these mandated performance audits every 3 years of the Council of Governments as well as Calaveras Transit. So I'm here to present to you our findings and recommendations out of our report. Just starting a little introduction about TDA. You're probably aware of the funding source. It's a major source of transit funding here in California. It's a quarter-cent tax, retail sales tax that is returned back to the county and spent primarily for transit as well as non-motorized uses. These audits are required of the recipients, including the COG and the transit system, and I'm here to present to you the findings and recommendations and to be accepted by the board for submittal to Caltrans. The general process for this audit reviews the accountability for the efficient and effective use of the revenue. The triennial audit, it's retrospective, so it's looking back over a 3-year period. And so for this cycle, it covers fiscal years 14-15 through 16-17. We conducted various tests for compliance with statutory provisions in the TDA law, as well as a review of different performance measures to gauge, again, the efficiency and effectiveness of the transit system. At the end, we view these audits as a management tool to improve for the future. Our scope of the audit, we lay it out in a series of different questions that we sought out to answer. First, has the agency complied with state requirements? Second, has the agency implemented prior recommendations? And so that provides the linkage to the audits that were conducted 3 years ago. What are the performance trends over the past 3 years? How well has the agency provided service? And finally, what recommendations can be made from all of this? So in starting with the Calaveras COG audit, with compliance with the different state mandates, we looked at 14 different compliance measures, and the COG has satisfactorily complied with those different mandates for a regional transportation planning agency. These include a couple examples here, including oversight of the TDA fund process and of the recipients, ensuring that there is an establishment of a Social Services Transportation Advisory Council, as well as ensuring that there's a process to receive transit comments, primarily through the unmet transit needs that's held annually. Also, with limited staff and resources, the COG has done a really good job of the TDA administration process. In regards to the prior performance audit recommendations, the COG has fully implemented 4 of the 5. These 4 are listed here, including funding transit services through the unmet needs process, amending their procedurals manual, exploring designation of a consolidated services agency that was conducted a couple of years ago, and lastly, to pursue mobility management services, which is a way to expand the potential offering of transportation services to those in need. The 5th recommendation was partially implemented and which is carried forward as a recommendation for this current audit cycle, and it relates to the Calaveras Transit, the county's accountability towards meeting fare box recovery and ensuring that it complies with the different TDA claim procedures. And I'll talk about that a little more as we get into the Calaveras Transit audit. Some additional findings include that the COG serving as a regional transportation planning agency is required to undergo updates to its long-range regional transportation plan. And so that RTP was adopted back in October of 2017, so not too long ago. There was extensive public outreach that was conducted as part of that process. The COG also commissioned an update to the Calaveras County Short Range Transit Plan that was approved in 2016. And certainly you're probably aware that SRTP is another update process to help improve transit services. One significant finding is the COG's role in obtaining state and federal funds for transit. And so these are some examples of those types of grants and partnerships that the COG has forged over these past 3 years, including procuring Caltrans planning grants, working with other neighboring planning agencies, like the example of Tuolumne County Transportation Council on a study. The COG has also programmed several years of funding for the local jurisdictions, and also is working on its online capital programs database. We had a chance to talk to a few of you through phone conversations about the COG, as well as talking to several of the social services TAC members. And really the commonality is that everyone had expressed high confidence in the COG's abilities and their knowledge, responsiveness, and ability to work on project programming and delivery. So out of our review for the COG, we came up with 6 different recommendations, starting with to continue to partner and identify mobility management strategies. As I mentioned earlier, the COG did some work to try to designate a CTSA, and so that process was undertaken. However, we further encourage COG to continue working with others in the community to identify additional strategies to improve the provision of transportation to the county. Second one is to ensure further accountability towards compliance with the TDA provisions, including fare box and so on. And so that links back with the prior audit recommendation that was partially implemented. The COG has been working carefully with the county back over the past 3 years to work on their TDA claims, their budgets, and so on. And so we just further encourage that continue. The third recommendation is to consider appointment of a student representative on the SS TAC. This is really an example that we've seen in other jurisdictions where student riders are a major part of a transit program. And so that's the same case here, in which a lot of the riders from Columbia College ride the transit system. And so in order to perhaps bring in the perspective of the college rider, that we've seen other jurisdictions include a student representative on their advisory committee to bring that voice, to bring the information and different ways of thinking about transit. Fourth recommendation is to update the new appointee orientation for the SS TAC. We were informed by several SS TAC members that they would certainly like to increase the amount of awareness about their role serving on the SS TAC. They do receive a handbook from the COG and go through the meetings and so on, but certainly they would like to have a little more hands-on approach from the COG staff in terms of perhaps some additional meetings with Amber and her group to get them acquainted for new members that get appointed. Fifth recommendation is to implement the timely use of funds guidelines. There are certain state and federal funds that have a timely use of funds within a couple of years, and so that is through state law, and so it's really just enforcing for the COG to help enforce a state law in terms of using these types of funding sources. The last recommendation for the COG is to develop a format and content for an annual COG report. Certainly there's a lot of good things that happen out of the COG. Certainly you're aware of all of these, and so it'd be great to further voice these in a type of annual report that can go out to the community, express really the role and responsibility of what the COG does. So I'll move on quickly to the transit performance audit, and we undertook a similar process in terms of reviewing the different types of information, interviews, and so on. And so in terms of the different compliance requirements of state law, Calaveras Transit over the past 3 years complied with 6 of 9 requirements. There were 2 that were in partial compliance, which include the fare box recovery, in which out of the 3 years, Calaveras Transit complied with 1 year of the 3. Also, the completion of the annual fiscal audits, several were behind the timeline of meeting those. And then the last requirement of the claim submittals, certainly there were identified issues with the county submitting those claims on time, and the staff effort to get those claims rectified. Regarding fare box recovery, again, I mentioned that it was below the TDA standard of 10% for the past 2 years, primarily due to the low ridership for the past 2 years. And so COG has a responsibility to impose a fare penalty that's in law should the operator miss the fare box recovery for 2 years. Regarding the prior recommendations, there were 6 last cycle, and Calaveras Transit implemented 4 of them. The 2 listed here in the hollow bullet points are those that are carried forward in this audit, which include furthering to pursue partnerships with local educational institutions. And so, again, we've seen in other examples elsewhere where transit agencies forge partnerships with local colleges, with local agencies and others, in which there could be a partnership form to increase revenues and to ensure that the students and so on could get their ride. The other recommendation that will go forward would be to for the transit system to regularly review and monitor performance with the contract operator. As you're aware, the service is contracted out to a private provider, and so we really didn't see that interaction, if you will, between the county and the private provider to talk about transit performance on a regular basis. And so we want to have that be ensured for the next cycle. Regarding the required CHP inspections, there is definitely good news that they were all met each 3 years. These inspections are conducted of the facilities as well as the transit vehicles. And so through the contract operator, Paratransit Services, those annual CHP inspections were satisfactory. Regarding the performance measures, it was a mixed trend for Calaveras Transit. The operating costs per hour, it was a good trend. It decreased over the last 3 years just due to the amount of service being provided grew at a higher percentage than the growth in operating costs. However, due to, again, the ridership issues that were faced the last 2 years, the cost per passenger increased significantly, as did, then the passengers per hour then decreased because, again, of the decline in ridership. Also, a new voucher program was implemented during this program to county residents to try to increase transit use. That was provided through state funding through the LC TOP program. And as we discussed, the COG had raised some significant issues regarding the county's TDA claim process through their budgeting practices. There are several instances of the claims not being in compliance with the handbook and so on. So I understand that there's been a lot of work done in terms of moving forward with all of this. And so just stating back what happened over this 3-year period. So in conclusion, the recommendations for Calaveras Transit, we have 5 of them, including to continue efforts to pursue the partnerships. Second one is to ensure that the performance measures are reviewed on a regular basis, not only with the contract operator, but also with the ITC policy board as well, so that there is solid information to base future decisions on. Third one is improving key reporting information in certain documents. The fourth one is, with the rollout of new services that have occurred the past couple of years, it would be great to have a follow-up survey with riders to gauge their experience about the services that have come about with the changes in the naming of the routes, the color coding, and so on. That could help with future planning. And lastly, reflecting back on the short-range transit plan, it had created a new transit mission statement, and so we would recommend that mission statement be adopted as you move forward with your new organizational structure for transit. So that concludes the audit presentation. Just want to thank you very much and be happy to answer questions.
Council, questions about the COG or Transit Triennial Performance Review? Any
I
public?
think we've strived to and done some things to address most of all of these issues, and I'm sure you're aware of the changes that are happening.
Yes.
Okay. If not, Phil can explain them to you.
I know, that's not, no, he's here. Yes, I know you'll be talking a lot about it later.
Is there any public comment? All right, seeing none, Derek, thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much.
Item 6 is an acceptance of the triennial performance audits. I'm thinking that we probably should have a motion to accept the triennial performance audits. Do we have a motion for that?
I'll move to accept that audit.
For both COG and Transit?
Again, transit.
I'll second.
A motion by Councilmember Herman, seconded by Councilmember Tofinelli. All in favor?
Aye.
Approved 6-0. Item number 7, approving the fiscal year 2018-19 operations budget, and we will have a public hearing after the introduction by Ms. Raggio.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Staff is requesting the council to approve the fiscal year 18-19 operations budget. Staff presented the draft budget at the March meeting. As you can see in attachment 7A, there's a very slight change of $1,000 under the communications line item, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Council.
Why'd the phone bill go up?
No.
No, that wasn't it.
No.
Okay.
I think it's with our internet connection.
Okay.
Any public comment? Seeing none, I will open this as a public hearing, as that's how this item was presented prior to this meeting. So we'll open the public hearing for the draft 2018-19 operations budget. Is there any public comment for the public hearing? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Do we have a motion to approve the fiscal year 2018-19 operations budget?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Motion to approve the operations budget by Councilmember Tofinelli, seconded by Councilmember Cantalano. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Approved 6-0. Item number 8. Approving the fiscal year 18-19 overall work program and overall work program agreement with Caltrans. Ms. Raggio.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is our fiscal year 18-19 final overall work program. It's due to Caltrans June 1st. The council approved the draft at the March meeting, and from the draft, this final has a slight change on work element number 11. COG had received grant funding. We are partnering with Tuolumne County Transportation Council to update the coordinated human services plan. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Any questions by council? Any comments by the public? This is also an item that requires our approval for Caltrans. Do we have a motion to approve the 2018-19 overall work program?
I move.
Moved by Councilmember Catalano, seconded by Councilmember Herman. All those in favor?
Aye.
Approved 6-0. Agenda item number 9, approving a fiscal year 2018-19 state transit assistant claim by the Calaveras Transit Agency in the amount of $322,013 for transit operations. Ms. Raggio.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, the Calaveras Transit Agency has submitted a claim for state transit assistance in the amount of $322,000. As you can see in the attachment, that is the apportionment. Let's see what attachment that is. It's 9B. This is the allocated estimate for fiscal year 18-19, and the claim is attached, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions by the council? Any public questions? I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the fiscal 18-19 STA claim by the CTA in the amount of $322,000.
Move.
Councilmember Catalano,
Second.
second by Councilmember Fullendorf. All those in favor?
Aye.
Approved 6-0. Agenda item number 10, resolutions approving fiscal year 2018-19 LTF claims by the Calaveras Transit Agency for transit operations. Mrs. Raggio.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, there are 2 claims attached to the staff report, and the reason being, as we discussed at the May meeting, FTA funding that was available to the county in 17-18 has been carried over and will be utilized by the Calaveras Transit Agency in 18-19. As discussed, we won't be able to invoice for that funding until late in the fiscal year. Therefore, we're requesting an operational reserve from the LTF account in the amount of $512,618. That is the first claim. And the second claim totals $115,734 for operating in 18-19. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Council? We have the public? Oh,
I was just doing, let me think. let's see, if I understand this, this money is coming from where again?
The LTF fund, we've
LTF.
had an unallocated apportionment that has been retained in the fund for over the last 3 years. At the end of fiscal year 17-18, we'll have approximately 580. And that's not including any funding for 18-19.
Thank you.
So we're borrowing 600,000 against 580, is that what I'm hearing?
No, we've had this funding in the LTF fund. So what we're doing is the county wasn't able to use a federal transit assistant apportionment. So the new JPA will be utilizing that funding in 18-19. Well, we won't be able to invoice against that funding until late in the fiscal year. So we need cash flow. We need
You need front
operating
money.
reserve. Yeah, so I put it in 2 separate resolutions, so when we get to the end of the year, if we want to release the operating reserve back into the LTF fund, we will do so. And then we are working with county staff because they weren't able to utilize FTA funding in 17-18, they've got a gap of $250,000 in their budget. So we're working with the county admin office and the auditor controller. So we'll be looking at swapping with the county. So they couldn't use the FTA funding, so we're going to pay them back in LTF funding over a year. But they will be needing to get a loan from the general fund.
All right,
Clear?
I'm clear.
Okay.
So when you say late in the year, you're saying March, April?
Well, there's a required 44% match. So usually in an average year, you would utilize 250. So you would hit that match by mid-year easily. But we're utilizing 512,000. So we've got to use this LTF as cash flow.
I understand the cash flows, but
Yeah.
you need money to keep paying bills
Yeah.
to get reimbursed.
Yep.
So, but we're talking March, you say later in the year,
We're hoping
We
to submit, we're submitting our agreements in July. Then you receive approval to start invoicing. Then we have to start incurring the cost by the monthly invoices of the operator. So we're hoping to turn in 2 invoices, one at the end of December
okay,
and get that chunk, and then we'll look at doing it in April and May, and then maybe a final one.
okay. Thank you.
No problem.
Any further council questions? Any public comment? We need a motion to approve the resolutions of fiscal year 18-19 LTF claims for the Calaveras Transit Agency for transit operations.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Councilmember Tofinelli,
Second.
seconded by Councilmember Catalano. All those in favor?
Aye.
Approved 6-0. Agenda item number 11, authorizing the executive director to negotiate a loan agreement with the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, MTC, as a strategy to prevent congestion mitigation air quality funds from lapsing. Ms. Collins.
All right, thank you. As the council is aware, the COG recently conducted a new call for projects to program congestion mitigation air quality, which we call CMAQ, funds for fiscal years 19-20 to fiscal year 22-23. That programming, approved programming, is attached to the staff report. The previous call for projects programmed CMAQ funds from fiscal year 14-15 to 19-20. And these projects, we've experienced several delays, and some have only obligated a portion of the amount programmed for these funds. And the issue really with CMAQ funds is they're subject to the AB 1012 rule, which has a 3-year time limit for the local agencies to obligate the funds, which means, so we program the funds in a particular fiscal year, then the local agency must go request for authorization in order to start billing against a project. So if they don't do that, then the clock starts, and within 3 years, the funds will lapse, and then they just go back to the state, and they're lost to our region. So once, projects aren't obligating, then we're kind of in a catch-up game, and it starts compounding on us. COG currently has an obligated balance of $819,705 on county and city projects. The county has recently informed COG that they will not be able to obligate the unobligated balance from their fiscal year 16-17 and 17-18 apportionments for the San Andreas Mountain Ranch Road Government Center Drive project. Staff has also let us know that they will not be meeting or being able to obligate their 18-19 funds for that project. So this then is going to continue to compound this issue. So there's two options. One is to find another project that could quickly obligate those funds and spend the funds. The other option that's allowed through state's timely use of funds policies is for COG to loan its unobligated funding to another agency. And the COG has been successful in the past in doing this. We've done several loans with the San Joaquin Council of Governments and more recently one with Merced COG. So we've contacted other COGs throughout the state about their willingness to take our CMAQ funds that are in jeopardy of lapsing, which is more immediately the $819,000. The Metropolitan Transportation Commission has indicated their willingness to work with us to take the loan and then repay us in 1819 or 1920. They've talked about an exchange with the Regional Surface Transportation Program funds, which provides funding for streets and roads, bike ped projects, which is what we use CMAQ funds for. So for us, it'd just be a wash. It's still federal funding. But for them, it's a benefit because they deliver on their CMAQ projects, so it's easy for them to obligate the $819,000 immediately. This loan would eliminate our risk of funds lapsing and could help reduce the risk of lapsing funds as far out as fiscal year 1920. This loan exchange will help us clean up our unobligated balance so that we're at a zero unobligated balance and allow the city and county to then move forward with their projects. We're also inquiring with the MTC about their willingness to include an option to loan out the 1819 funds of $407,000 that's on the Mount Ranch Road project that the county has informed us that they will not be able to obligate next year. So so we're currently trying to work out this agreement. I didn't have it ready for you at this meeting, but MTC would like to take the agreement to their July meeting, so I would like the council's support to move forward with negotiating that agreement with MTC, and I would bring it for your official approval in the August meeting. And then subsequent to that, we would end up going through a call for projects process with the TAC and come back to the board with a recommendation on how to expend the funds once the loans are repaid. I know it's a kind of a complicated situation. The CMAQ program is a complicated program, especially for small agencies such as Calaveras. So if you have any questions, happy to
I was wondering
answer.
how, maybe I've heard this before and it didn't, stay in there, but why haven't we been able, or the county hasn't been able to obligate those funds?
I think naturally throughout projects there's project delays, there's changes in priorities. We reprogrammed, last year we moved funds from the high school sidewalk project to the Mountain Ranch Road project. So there's just changes. Sometimes I think there's miscommunication from the project manager side to the COG, who's the funding agent, to give us enough time to be able to react to changes in project schedules. So the earlier we know, the better. We're able to do more about it. But, we've learned about this change in that project schedule at a late point. So really now our only option is a loan agreement.
Further council comments, questions?
Well, I see where you want to include this year's obligation, $407,000 possibly for that. But the timeline in order for us that we have to utilize that soon for this project, we might need those funds and obligate them for that project. So I'm a little bit concerned about, at this time, including that portion of it, so, because we do have time before we lapse. So,
Doesn't it say that they're gonna start repaying in 18-19 then?
Correct.
So within this next,
Well, I think we're shooting for 1920, but
okay.
I mean, they're willing to pay back as soon as 1819. The
Is
only,
this a 0% interest loan, or do we get to
yeah,
charge
it's
them
a,
money or
it's a
anything?
clean
Just
exchange.
Dollar for dollar?
Yeah, dollar
Okay.
for dollar.
the important part is we won't lose any of the funds.
Yeah.
And so the only concern I would have about keeping the 407 in the pot, and knowing that staff said I don't think they'll be prepared for construction until 2021 at the earliest for the Mountain Ranch Road project, is that then, we leave it in there, and then if the city or another project is delayed a little bit, then that unobligated balance ends up kind of stacking on itself. And one other issue too with unobligated, I know we have the 3-year timeline here, but every year that we have an unobligated balance, and if the federal government comes through with a rescission, and they did last year, and we lost 53,000 because we had an unobligated balance. So that's another risk of leaving an unobligated balance in the bucket.
Just gave my thoughts, so we are bored.
Well, and I think we can leave, if the board decides to leave the 1819 funds, the 407 as is, and when I come back to you with a call for projects to program the loan funds when they come back, we can address the 407 at that time, if you would.
That's fine.
Okay.
I would be happy with that.
Yeah, I'd say we've got 2 months basically for Amber to get the communications cleared up with staff.
Yeah,
Before
we
we
have
get-
to do it before October.
And I think MTC has indicated to us they would like to keep it under 1 million, so, the 819, they're definitely willing to do, but if we added the 407, that's above the 1 million for them, so I think it'd be a stretch to get them to take the 1.2 loan.
Okay. Do we have any public comment? Do we have a motion to authorize the executive director to negotiate a loan agreement with the MTC as a strategy to prevent the loss of the CMAQ funding?
I'll move it.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Councilmember Tofinelli, a second by Councilmember Contalano. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Approved 6-0. Item number 12. Approving the award of a professional services agreement with OmniMeans, a GHD company, for the Valley Springs Complete Streets Capital Infrastructure Plan. Ms. Collins.
Thank you. The COG and the county were recently awarded an SB1 transportation planning grant for a complete streets capital infrastructure plan for the community of Valley Springs. The plan will explore multimodal improvements within the historic town, including streets serving the school pickup and drop-off. The project includes an assessment of existing conditions, comprehensive public participation and outreach, conceptual design alternatives, and development of a complete streets plan, and implementation and financial plan. The COG released a request for proposals on April 13th, and we received 3 proposals by the closing date of May 11th. A proposal review panel made up of COG, county, and Caltrans staff evaluated proposals based on the criteria listed in the RFP. And based on this review, OmniMeans was the top-ranked proposal, and the committee is recommending to the council contract award to OmniMeans. They're based out of Roseville, and they're a multidisciplinary consulting firm with a range of transportation planning and engineering expertise. OmniMeans is also partnering with Design Workshop, who will provide public outreach and design services. And Design Workshop worked on the Angels Camp Main Street plan, so So we've worked with them before, and Omni Means did the San Andreas Gateway Corridor study. So they're firms we have successfully worked with in the past. And the contract is not to exceed amount of $219,085. Any questions?
On the other projects that this company provided for us, when they gave us a proposal of saying not to exceed the amount, did those other projects not exceed that amount?
That's a good question. The Angels Camp Main Street did not exceed that amount. The San Andreas, the only reason we did add funding to that project because of coordination with Caltrans and the need for additional technical studies. So it wasn't the consultant who added funds to that project, it was the project team and Caltrans decision.
Okay, and so is there a potential that this figure might go higher?
Not that I expect right now, but the 219 is below what the grant funds were.
Okay.
So if there is an instance where there's a need to add some technical studies, we have some room in the budget.
Okay.
It's your project, isn't it, Gary?
All right. Any further council comments?
I would like to see this go forward, and I'll move it as soon as you get to public comments. I will move this
I'll
item.
ask right now. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, I have a motion to approve the PSA with Omni Means.
I will move this item, Mr. Chair, proudly.
And a second. Okay, moved by Councilmember Tofinelli, seconded by Councilmember Clement. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
6-0.
Is there hesitation there with that?
Vote for the fact.
Okay. Item number 13, the Caltrans report.
We have our new Caltrans rep.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. It's an honor to be here. I'm Gregoria Ponce. I'm new representative with Caltrans and Office of Rural Planning. I believe my prior colleague Kevin is here, so I'm stepping into that. I want to thank Amber for assisting me in onboarding me with information. And she's briefed you with regards to the grant program with Valley Springs. There's another one, the Angels Camp North Street 49, just to share. The additional one with Pope Street Class 1 facility. And I believe there was a letter to proceed, so we're very excited about that. In terms of additional verbal report, I'm happy to report that the district has received approval to proceed in developing a district active transportation plan. So we're looking forward to execute that contract and move forward and reach out with our partners in developing that and looking at coordinating with you all. So we're very excited about that. Other than that, I really didn't have very much to share, but I'm certainly here to hear your thoughts, to hear your comments, and if you have any questions for me.
Council.
I brought this up to Kevin last time, and he was going to look into it, but obviously he moved on. We've been having a number of serious accidents at the intersection in McCollum Hill on Highway 26 and 49. A couple of them have been fatal, and we'd like to see some improvements on that intersection by Caltrans for safeties. And then one other project that's been going on for a while you might want to check into is a couple of years ago, Caltrans paved Highway 49 and 12, but they stopped where 49 comes in from the south here in San Andreas, and then up here at the north, they stopped because of the crown in the road was too excessive for them, and they were going to come back with a plan to fix it and get it repaved. And we have a lot of projects on hold at this time, waiting for that to progress. As part of an underground PG&E Rule 20 underground district where we're going to place all the overhead lines underground during the time of that construction. And then there's a mobility plan here for San Andreas is involved in that project too. It's all hinging on Caltrans and what their plan is and when they plan on doing the improvements. Obviously, it has to be ground down to accommodate. So if you could look into that, maybe next time come back and give us somewhat of a report on what's happening on both those.
I certainly can. If I could ask you again, we did, you talked about the McCollum Highway.
McCollum Hill, it's Highway 26 and 49. A couple of recently fatal accidents and other major accidents have been occurring there lately. And Kevin was aware of it, and hopefully you can become somewhat aware of it and help us out, because it is a very safety-oriented problem there.
I'll be absolutely taking both of those items back.
Okay, thank you.
We'll even give you 2 months before you come back to tell us.
I'm actually wanting to provide something sooner than that.
Well, we don't meet for 2 months, that's why I'm telling you that.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you for letting me know.
I had a question also, or something to bring up. Now, in the wayfinding, there was a Main Street plan for Angels Camp, and I guess I was going to ask Amber, is that been approved by Caltrans, that wayfinding? Were they involved in the?
No, the wayfinding plan, that was completed, I think, by DAC before the Main Street plan came on, and that hasn't been,
It hasn't.
I think, approved by Caltrans, but I know your city administrator is trying to coordinate with Caltrans on
Yes.
moving that forward.
Yes, and we need to have a coordination so that, because the signage or wayfinding that was proposed is, might run into a problem with Caltrans, and it's really important for Angels Camp to be able to get some signs for the wayfinding up. And we'd like to see that expedited rather than slowed down through a lot of complications. So anyway, it's something where you need to speak to our city administrator, if you would, and see if there's something we could work out that won't take too long. Thank you.
Any other questions for me? No?
I don't see any.
Excellent.
Thank you very much, and welcome.
Thank you.
Yes, welcome. What is your name again? I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Gregoria Ponce.
Gregoria?
Yes.
Well, welcome.
Yes,
Thank
welcome.
you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are you driving from Stockton?
Yes, I am.
You are?
Okay. Item 14 is the county report. I don't see a county person here to give their report. We do have an attachment, the CIP program provided to us. Is there any council comment about the CIP program presented in our agenda? Seeing none, move on to item 15, transit report. Similarly, I don't see a transit report person to give us a report. We also have items 15A and that's it, 15A, the capital improvement program for transit. I guess it's self-explanatory. Move on to item 16, city report. I think these folks are watching the Warriors game tonight.
I know, goodness, it's already started.
Item 16 also has a capital improvement program report. Most of these are scheduled out in fiscal years future. There's a lot of zeros, but I noticed that the fiscal years are future years with a couple of exceptions. Just highlighting it. I don't think there's anything further to be said, so. I was just curious, has the city had a success in recruiting a new replacement for
Which one? The finance?
Dave Hannum.
For Dave Hannum, we have Amy Augustine, who is a contractor part-time,
Okay.
and is doing a very good job from what I hear, and
Okay.
a lot of things are moving along, actually, in our last agenda. And
Okay,
some
good.
things, yeah, so, yes, but because of her being a contractor and having 2 days a week, I don't know, usually Melissa said she would try to be here at times, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, and Melissa did
She-
contact us to let us know
Yeah.
she wouldn't make it.
Item number 17 is the council reports. Council reports. Anything from our West Point area?
Nothing to report.
Okay. Mr. Oliveira, thank you for standing in this evening.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
Ms. Fuller?
Just letting the board know that council approved the contract yesterday for the Murphy's Grade project. So I know on the city report, it's still showing some missing numbers, but we're moving ahead with that, and we're working with COG and the city and Amy. So,
Okay. Mr. Tofinelli?
I would just like to report that the county, at our last meeting, Board of Supervisors meeting, agreed to appoint Matt, what's Matt's last name? Borges, as interim Public Works Director.
Oh, okay.
And Matt was a previous interim for COG back in 2010, I believe it was. He's familiar with COG staff, and I'm sure you guys have already met with him at some point, so
Good.
we hope to have a smooth transition when we fill that position permanently going forward. So that's my report.
Ms. Herman?
Nothing to report?
I have nothing to report. So I'll move on to staff reports. Okay.
The only thing I have to report is we have an upcoming community workshop for the Murphy's Complete Streets project. It'll be at the old schoolhouse on June 27th at 5:30. So we're looking forward to that. That'll be the second workshop of that project.
Albert.
You know, who lives there across the street from that? Tom Tryon lives across the street from,
Oh, really?
kind of, a little bit up the street. No.
Okay. If that concludes the executive director's update on various projects, our next board meeting will be in August.
We have to adjourn until 6:30 now, and then reconvene.
We will.
Transit.
That'll give a chance for,
August 1st.
August 6th,
First.
August 1st?
Yeah.
Okay, our next meeting will be on August 1st at 5:30 in these chambers for the Calaveras Council of Governments. Thank you.